Hi, I'm Councilmember Jack Hastings. Welcome to my council conversation show. Today we're talking about recycling. It's been a trending topic across the nation and here in Surprise for the past couple years, with the recycling industry suffering a supply versus demand problem and many recyclables nationwide being diverted to landfills. Because of this, Surprise suspended its curbside recycling program and is working to find a fiscally responsible solution that also creates significant positive environmental impacts. Today, I'm joined by Mike Gent, the city's Deputy City Manager and Public Works Director, for a conversation on this very topic. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks, Councilmember. It's great to join with you on this topic.
Absolutely. So, other cities have seemed to continue, at least it appears, their curbside recycling. So, what was behind the decision for Surprise to suspend their recycling program?
Sure. Well, I think it might be important at this point to take a little bit of a step back and talk about what is recycling, right? So the curbside recycling program, blue bin next to your curb, and for many of us, that's what we think of as recycling. So when I separate my trash into the black container and put my recyclables in the blue container, I can pat myself on the back and say, I just recycled. However, if you redefine recycling as more than just which container you put it in and to what happens to the material that gets put in those containers, then you start to have a slightly different look. So in the past, when we had a curbside recycling program, we had two separate trucks. One truck serviced the black container, one truck serviced the blue container. And they would go to two different destinations. The black truck would drive to the landfill and the blue truck would drive to a material recovery facility. We commonly call that a MRF, MRF, material recovery facility. And the material that's brought to that material recovery facility is then sorted into different commodities. So the cardboard gets into a cardboard stack and the aluminum goes to an aluminum pile and glass and plastics and so on. So again, many people might count that as recycled at that point. So now that it's been sorted into different piles, we've recycled. But again, if you forward that into, well, what happens to it after it's sorted into the piles, and does it actually go back into a manufacturing process and get reprocessed into a new product? And I think that ideally, we all imagine that's what's happening. It's going into another product as soon as we push it to the curb. But that's not quite what happened. So legacy-wise, when we started our curbside recycling program many years ago, there was a market for people to purchase those recycling commodities. And so we were able to have a program for many years where we were able to not really think about it, push our container to the curb and drop it off at the material recovery facility and just know that something good was happening with it. But over the last decade, really, things started to change. There started to be more supply of recyclables than ever before. More and more people were joining in the effort, and that supply soon outpaced demand for the recyclable material. And so right at the source, in that material recovery facility, decisions had to be made from an economic point of view. We don't have a buyer today for this cardboard. So do we want to store the cardboard or do we want to get rid of it and put it in the landfill? And more over time, we saw that the MRFs start to make decisions on some of the commodities that it just made more economic sense for them to drive up the hill and put it in the landfill as opposed to trying to find a buyer for it. This became especially true as the market changed dramatically. So in about 2013, China introduced a policy called the green fence policy, where they said, we don't want trash and there's too much contamination included in the recyclables that are being sent to us. So they reduced the amount of contamination that was acceptable in a bin to 5%. This was a pretty significant shift for our MRFs, our material recovery facilities in the United States, because we hadn't been trying to sort to that level of, or that limitation of contamination. So that a lot of them overhauled their facilities. We're talking about millions of dollars in investments to be able to make sure we weren't sending a high quantity of contamination along with our recyclables. About 2017, that green fence policy shifted into what they called the national sword policy. And they said 5% contamination is no longer acceptable. We really don't want the trash of the world sent to China. So now we'll go to half of 1%, so 0.5%.
Which isn't really realistic.
Exactly right. That level of tolerance, we just can't separate to that high of a quality in our MRFs. And really what China was telling us at that point in time is, we don't want your products anymore. And since that time, they've actually gone to a 0% So really, they have turned off their desire to have our recyclable commodities enter their market. For a while there, we found some other markets in around the world, international markets, but even those started to turn off. And so really, the demand for recycling today is probably 75% less than it was 3 years ago. So going back to your question, why are other cities able to have curbside recycling programs and Surprise not? If you count it as recycling, just putting it by the curb and having a separate truck pick it up, those other cities have that program. And we could have that program too. We want to deliver value to our residents, and more important, or just as important as value, is we want honesty. We want transparency. So we want our residents to be able to trust that when we say we're delivering a program to them, that we are in fact delivering that service. And so when we became aware that much of what we brought to the MRF, the material recovery facility, was actually being landfilled, not in some far distant city, but landfilled right next door to the MRF here in Surprise, Arizona, it didn't make a lot of sense to continue supporting that program. At the same time, the costs were increasing dramatically. So we went from getting paid for recyclables to paying a small amount for recyclables to paying a lot of money for recyclables. So just as an example, we pay about $29 per ton to take material to the landfill. When we pushed pause on our recycling program, that cost had risen to about $115 per ton. So more than about 4 times the cost of trash. Cost alone wasn't our sole decision maker. We wanted to be able to deliver value in an actual real recycling program. And since we weren't able to do that under our current opportunities, we decided to push pause until we could find a real viable, environmentally sustainable and fiscally responsible program.
So what do you say to the resident who simply thinks that recycling is a cost issue and they're willing to pay a little bit more?
I say thank you. So this is one of the big comments we receive from residents is I want a program, I want to recycle, and I'm willing to pay a little more for that. And so I appreciate that passion, that dedication to recycling. And in fact, when we return to a program and we are able to establish that viable, responsible recycling program, it likely will cost a little bit more money. And so I thank them for that enthusiasm, for that support for recycling. And then I help them understand what we just discussed, that in the Northwest Valley of Phoenix right now, the options available for recycling are limited. And currently we haven't been able to identify a viable program that can assure us that the material we bring to them will be recycled really at any cost.
Absolutely. So if you take a look at what we're doing right now to address recycling as a whole, obviously curbside recycling is a much larger issue than Surprise alone. It has national implications and there's only so much we can do. So as far as what we're going through right now, we have a drop-off recycling program. Earlier this week I took my stuff to the drop-off recycling site. Is that recycled too, or does that just go to the landfill?
Great question, and thank you very much for patronizing our recycle drop-off center and encouraging other people to as well. So we streamline the commodities that we accept at that recycle drop-off location. So we accept clean cardboard, we accept aluminum, and we accept plastics 1s and 2s. So we know that there's a market for this, a demand for this supply. We actually have a partnership with a private recycler in Phoenix that allows us to bring them to them, and they assure us that 100% of the material we bring to them is in fact making it through the process and becoming new product again. That company would be an incredible partner for us. However, they're at capacity, so they can't take more. The quantity material that we collect at that drop-off center is very small compared to what we collect through our curbside recycling program. And so that company has a desire to expand and could be an answer for us long-term or even short-term if they can get some certain expansion opportunities. But the material that's brought to our drop-off center, we can absolutely assure you it is being recycled. And one kind of note to make there is the hours are somewhat limited for that drop-off center, but that's because we staff it. So when someone brings their recycling there, they will actually see a Surprise staff member who will help them make sure that there's no contamination, that the materials bringing in there are those streamlined commodities that we accept, so that they can educate and make sure that the material we're getting there is living up to what we were saying, and that is it's being recycled.
Absolutely, and I had the chance to stop by, and it was a great opportunity. I got to see I'm a teacher, so I got to see a former student who had graduated back in 2020. And he was very knowledgeable. It's not just someone who's going to take your stuff and dump. They separate the cardboard from the plastic, and they have different bins, and they explain everything to you. And it was a fairly quick and simple process. So when we look into the long term, obviously right now we're in kind of a hold, So what are some long-term solutions that residents could possibly look forward to, and what does the timeline look like for the resident who's frustrated because they want to be able to do their part, but maybe they just can't make it out to the drop-off recycling every week?
Sure. Well, and I appreciate your kind comments about our staff. I think that's one message I want to make sure people understand is whether it's our council members like yourself who are passionate about this issue or our highly informed staff who are working on this professionally every day, the City of Surprise team is full of people who want a responsible program. We're dedicated to finding a real solution that works for our community. You also mentioned that this isn't a City of Surprise issue, that this is certainly a regional issue, a statewide issue, a national, and even an international issue. We only have one world. And so this issue being as big as it is means we don't have to go it alone. We can certainly look for and establish partnerships that will help us take that next step. Our neighboring cities, as well as the regional cities, have been talking and working together to try to find solutions. The real progress I think that's being made here is there's cities like ourselves who are willing to push pause on the status quo, saying this isn't good enough, we need to do better, and trying to identify that next step, that opportunity to do significantly better than what we've been doing in the past when it comes to recycling. What can we do, and what's the timelines? There are a variety of options. When we went out to bid for a recycling partner, someone who could take our recycling material, we only received one bid back. That option didn't work for us, which is why we find ourselves where we're at. However, cultivating competition, so bringing into our market other entities that can service us, as well as continuing to work with that one bidder who said that they'd like to service us, trying to find that sweet spot that works for our community. So that's short term and kind of intermediate term. So in a matter of weeks or months, one of those could come to fruition, and we could absolutely turn back on our program if that were to happen. Realistically, we also want to be, if possible, independent of the market. What can we do to make sure we never find ourselves in this situation again? And there are some steps that can be taken in that direction as well. A public recycling option that involve multiple cities that could service a regional issue and really step up our game as the greater Phoenix metro area is something that many cities are interested in being a part of. We work with the Arizona State University School of Global Sustainability. And they've brought us together in meetings as well as individually surveyed and try to gather data. They bring in experts from all over the world to try to look at our regional issues and find solutions that might be able to help us move forward. Some of those are a little bit longer term. So we're talking 3 to 5 years out. And then of course, even if we come with an interim condition that kind of gets us to that, we're willing to explore whatever that will help our future generations have a viable, sustainable program for many years to come.
So Mike, when residents put out both bins, the blue bin and the black bin, are they just both trash cans now? I mean, are we still supposed to separate? If we are supposed to separate, why? If they're going to the same place, what's the reasoning behind that?
So great question. This one's not intuitive at all, but Arizona State actually has laws that governing trash pickup, and Maricopa County Environmental Services enforces the laws of the state. And so the state requires twice weekly pickup for residential collection. So any hauler in the state of Arizona is required to service containers twice a week. So the City of Surprise, like many municipalities, receives an exemption or a waiver from that requirement by having a recycle bin as that second container. And so we can't just say we'll stop using one of the containers and only pick up with the black container because then we'd no longer be meeting the requirements of state law. And so having two containers keeps us in compliance. State law also governs that trash has to be bagged and tied. So inside your black container, you can't just put your loose garbage in there. It has to be bagged and tied. And that's primarily for public health. We don't want to have rats and flies and other type of vectors, disease-spreading vermin. And so we bag and tie it to reduce that risk of having a public health emergency. So the recycled container, the blue bin, on the other hand, you can put loose recycled material. In fact, no bags, because bags can't go through recycling centers. So bags are not allowed in the blue container. It's just loose, clean, dry recycling. So if a resident puts trash in that blue bin, that increases the risk of having a public health situation, attracting rats and other type of disease carriers. And so we're actually required by state law and the Maricopa County to ensure that the trash is bagged and tied, the recyclables are clean, dry, and separated. And so this isn't a city surprise issue. This is making sure that we're in compliance as residents with state law, and keeping our ability to haul trash and our licenses in place. So we appreciate those that are asking the question. We also appreciate you choosing to have good habits that keep us in compliance, obeying the law. And then really the best benefit is that we're ready to go. So when recycling comes back online, we don't have to have a massive introduction or trial period before we can start bringing our recycling to a recycle center. Because we have both bins and a vast majority of our residents are following the rules and putting recycling in the blue bin, literally next week, if we found a viable option, we could start bringing it to a recycle center. So thank you very much to all those who are patiently continuing to follow the rules, bag and tie their trash in the black bin, and put clean, dry recyclables in the blue bin. And that will pay off for our city in big ways once we're able to have a recycling program in place.
Absolutely, and it seems like there's two areas. There's the environmental impact, and there's the making sure we're fiscally responsible. And right now, recycling meets neither. It's not fiscally responsible, and it's not environmentally sustainable. And it's important that we're transparent to our residents. And you and I spoke in my office the other day, and we talked about what other cities are doing. And we could send around a second truck, and we could pay more to do that, and have them, and with no guarantee of it being recycled, and it's not the right thing to do. And so now that we've taken recycling away, and in my opinion, it's not the best thing in the world, but it's our best option now, we can bring it back, and we can bring it back in the right way. So as a resident watching, what can I do on a personal level? How can I help to make sure that I am taking care of what I need to do? And besides using the drop-off facility, is there any way that I can get involved in this process?
Fantastic question, Councilmember. Thank you very much. I'll answer it in two parts. One is at a higher level, and the other is at an individual level. So first off, on a higher level, why are we doing these programs? Why do we even have it? And the answer is clearly we're trying to make a difference in this world. We're trying to be environmentally responsible. And so for us to choose to send 2 trucks around, knowing that both of the containers were going to end up at the landfill, means that we're paying for additional diesel that we don't have to. Means that we're adding additional emissions to our air quality challenges here in Surprise that we don't have to. And the wear and tear on our roads, the increased need for staffing. And so from an environmentally responsible point of view, we actually are doing more for the environment today by suspending our program until we can find that viable solution, by not wasting those resources, not adding those emissions and pollution to our environment for a program that's not actually moving the needle. So from a higher level point of view, we're better off pushing pause until we can do something that's sustainable. Now from an individual point of view, so there is an abundant amount of information that says recycling can work, that recycling can reduce greenhouse gas emissions, that we can make a difference by a real recycling program. But as good as recycling can be, it's not even close to the best option. So we can reduce our consumption. That's significantly better than recycling. So what am I saying? I'm saying reduce your use. So choose not to bring trash home, stuff home that you don't need. So simple example, we just recently celebrated getting a Costco Surprise. So excited about that. When you go through the line, they ask you if you want boxes. It's really convenient to have those boxes to carry your groceries in from the car to your home. But what are you going to do with those boxes? Not a lot. Costco has a robust cardboard recycling program in their warehouse. Let's leave those boxes there and let's allow them to recycle them, as opposed to curbside. We don't have a recycling option, so many of those boxes are going to end up in the landfill. When you're going through the drugstore and you see on the end cap a really cool new alarm clock, and it's only $2.99, and you're going, wow, that's really cool and it's so cheap, I can't afford not to buy it. But do you actually need it? So let's stop bringing home stuff to our homes that we don't need. If we stop consuming that extra layer of materials and stuff, then we don't have nearly as much waste. We don't go home and throw away our old alarm clock. So That's kind of a big example. We have some really neat citizens in the city of Surprise that reach out to us occasionally. You recently had an interaction with one of our residents who talked about how she uses bar soaps so she doesn't have plastic containers. So she's eliminated significant amount of plastic containers in her home by choosing to buy things that don't come in plastic containers. Same thing with food at restaurants or whatnot. Virtually all those plastic containers are ending up in the landfill. So if we reduce bringing home plastic containers, we don't have to worry about whether it's recycled or trash. It doesn't come to our home in the first place. So if we reduce, not only will it help us during this kind of period of time when we don't have recycling, but it will actually have a greater impact on reducing greenhouse gas emissions and making the environment cleaner and more sustainable. So I would encourage our residents, those that are watching our conversation right now, to use the internet and search, hey, sustainable options. How can I reduce my use? Reduce versus recycle. And they'll see website after website after website that will give you ideas of what you can do individually to reduce your footprint, to reduce your waste. And reducing waste not only is fiscally responsible because we don't have to pay for it, but is much more environmentally sustainable.
Absolutely. And the 3 R's, which we often forget recycling is the third one: reduce, reuse, and recycle. And I know, so you're saying we need to order less stuff on Amazon is kind of what you're trying to say.
Well, consider what you order on Amazon. So there
Correct.
are sustainable products on Amazon. So, but yes, the reduce, reuse, recycle isn't in that order coincidentally. It's in that order by level of priority. So reduce is a much more effective and desirable choice than reusing or recycling. And reusing is that much more responsible than recycling as well. So recycle is a better option, and it has proven benefits, better option than putting it in trash, but not nearly as important or impactful as reducing and reusing.
Absolutely. And thank you, Mike, for all the work that you've done, behind the scenes, and you've met with me in private at city council meetings. And, we are all frustrated by the situation we're in. We all want to recycle. We all want to do it. It's not, I've never met someone who's anti-recycling, but we have to make sure we go about doing it the right way. And we're not just going to do it just to say that we're doing it.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate being able to speak about this topic. And just to be clear, I don't expect this to be the exclamation point on a conversation. This will be an ongoing conversation until we have the solutions in place. And even then, we'll evaluate to see how we can do it better. Thank you very much for your passion on the subject and giving us a chance to talk about it with our residents. And certainly, if anybody has further questions or would like details, if they reach out to yourself or city staff, we'll be happy to visit with them and go through the options that are available.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for joining me today. And thank you for watching. You can find more information about drop-off recycling on the city's website at surpriseaz.gov/drop-off recycling. If you have questions or comments for me, please reach out by phone or email. I also welcome you to subscribe to my monthly newsletter, which is filled with the latest city news and information. Just click the Notify Me button on my website to sign up. Thanks for watching.